We are live. Parker, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Look at guys, look at the kangaroo and the world. I don't even know like what do I put? Do I put the Space Needle? Is that what I the Statue of Liberty? Maybe in New York, I think it's like a completely different world. All right,
we should
let's do this.
we, we should bring in that extra line where we can put in where we're from. So
Yeah, the underneath.
mm,
I wonder if we can do that like live. Let's see. So if I go
it'll look pretty cool in some of our bigger sessions.
like on bigger session, it would look better, right? See,
Yeah.
show headlines. So can you modify yours? Do you think you know how to modify yours?
No. Mhm.
I
I'll look at
think
it later.
I think if you log out and then join back in, it will tell you to add something, I think.
Yeah, I'll worry about it later.
I have a
Anyhow,
green guests, layouts, hotkeys, recording, general. Yeah, we've been using StreamYard for a while, but I really don't like the fact that they don't know how to work across. Like they don't know how to work across multiple disciplines and stuff like that. Like if you sorry, multiple regions and stuff
yeah,
like that.
I was just reading on that. It looks like it might be something to do with our camera resolutions.
The camera resolution.
Looks. Yeah, I was just having a quick scan of that just before the session started.
Interesting. Okay. All right. With no further ado, let's go and see, if we can, re-architect the RESTful sense piece because that's a blocker for us. We're gonna have to kind
Mhm.
of make progress on that. And I think I skipped a couple of nights now, so if we can actually get to the end of the week with a good architecture that can drive the development of RESTful sense, I think we can do a lot of progress there. What do you think about
Can,
that plan?
It sounds like a good thing, and in doing that, I actually went and rethought about how we did that. So I did that whole thing and did another version.
Show me what you got. Show me what you
Yeah,
got
yeah,
there.
that's what I wanted to see. So
Brian Parker with the kangaroos. Do you call them roos?
yeah,
Or do
Ruse.
roos?
Yeah,
Okay, let's do it.
let me find it again. So I just spun up a completely different project. I just wanted to see how I could build this differently.
Okay.
Um, yep, and just see if I
Did
could
you use
simplify it.
generics or something like that? Yeah, go ahead.
I did use generics, and you need to look at it regarding the standard. Wow, it's really laggy or something.
Yeah, it got laggy a little bit. All right. Zoom
Mm,
in a little bit if you want, if you will. Let's see, standard
yeah.
reflection.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me break this down for you. So at this stage, I've only done the happy path with logic testing. I've done a little bit of validation, not much. So
So you basically built a library called standard reflection.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't know what that's there for. Anyhow, so I then broke it out into these four different subtypes from the
Mm-hmm.
reflection broker.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not breaking any rules. So even when we have to ask for the type, it has to be a separate.
Good.
Yeah. So just to show you what they look like under the hood, they're doing nothing. They're just purely.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. This is the tricky one.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you're passing in a property info.
Yep.
Well, then my question to you is property info a native type?
Um, there's
We are allowed to use native or primitive types as input output parameters in addition to the contract.
Yes.
So
Well,
if go
in
ahead.
this case, because we're building forms, and we're doing reflection, I think it mm, is it.
Like if you go inside property info, is this a model that you had to define, or is it something that comes out of the box?
It's something that comes out of the box by
Then
system.
that's allowed. Your
Yeah.
contract here is okay.
Yeah.
But then what's the challenge on
But the problem
uh
with this is mocking it. It is a terrible thing to mock. Everything is,
yeah.
yeah, it's
But
abstract and it's all read-only properties. Yeah.
well, let me ask you this. In your business logic, what do you do with property info? Like if you go into the actual logic of this,
Uh,
isn't all what you care about is to pass this to the broker and mock that you pass this to the broker?
exactly, and that's what I did with the test.
That's it. That's all that I
Yep.
care about.
Yep.
As long as the implementation of this,
I did a lot of. I had a lot of rethinking during the when I did all these logic tests last night. I had a lot of rethinking, making sure we're only testing what it should be doing and not what the reflection is doing. So
okay, so at the client level, what do you have at the client level? You have a a RESTful reflection client,
yep.
and you're basically going saying create multi-part form data content.
hmm That's it.
Good. And you just pass the type,
hmm
and basically it turns it into a multi-part form.
Yes.
But how come the type is an object and not a
Because last night
you,
when I was actually doing this, I was actually thinking of this as breaking this out as a separate library. You
mm,
might know. Yep. So we may not, if we're doing reflection, um, I guess in this case, I should restrict it to a class. Yes.
I mean if it works, you're gonna need to
Yeah.
fat arrow this. Well, there will be exception handling. Hey
Yeah.
Gregory.
Yep.
Um
I agree. This one should be a class because we're actually dealing with what, yeah, in this particular case. I was actually, when I was writing this whole thing, I didn't actually turn it into something specific
mm.
for OpenAI until I got to the client.
Okay, so now if you go to the services, if you open up
Yeah.
the services,
Yep.
so you have foundations and orchestrations, and
Yeah.
then
Processing.
in the orchestration and processing. So in the orchestration service, if you double click inside that logic, you have multi-part form, add string content, add stream contents. You pass in the object and then multi-part form content, and then you kind of append on top of that.
hmm
Okay, I think about if you share this somewhere,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
is it
Well,
somewhere public that we
no,
can
not
get?
yet. I
Mm,
wanted to show you all this before I did that. And
yeah.
one of the issues that you need to really look closely at is how I did this logic testing on the attributes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can, I think I shared, I actually questioned ChatGPT about this, and it sort of responded in a way that I sort of expected. It basically said you can go to a lot of trouble to dynamically create a class in memory and then attach attributes to it. And then
Right.
it also posited the point, what's the point of doing this? It really achieves a little extra. Other than, yeah, so it suggested that we maybe just create some test classes and just
Right.
run them. Yeah,
Right.
because again, we're not testing attributes. We're only testing to see if it pulls the attribute off the property.
That's all we care about. In fact,
Yeah.
actually, not even that. We really care about being able to call the right brokers that will give us the attributes and
hmm
then passing it back to some broker method to give us values about these attributes. So all
Yep.
that you're doing is just orchestration. You're not really doing the work. Think about think about orchestration services as a construction engineer or architect. They don't actually do the work. They just go look at the labor, the folks that are working, that are actually carrying the materials and stuff like that, and saying, "Are you guys doing your jobs?" That's it.
Yep.
As long as the outcome matches the expectation, the little implementation details underneath that, as long as it's primitive and as long as it's not business logic, then yes, of course, why not?
Yep. I know the other thing you want to look at is my processing services to make sure I haven't consumed too much. So each of them only consume two of the foundation services.
On the processing service, you can't do that. You need an orchestration service for that.
For which a processing service can't a processing service take two foundation?
A processing service orchestrates on one foundation service, but multiple foundation service primitive operations. So just to explain this, you can have, I'll take the screen for a sec.
Yeah.
So at the processing level, you can't basically, let's see here. So let's say you have, let's say, assume that you have a foundation service, and this foundation service is giving you this capability, add student, retrieve all students, right? And maybe update student, or sorry, modify student, because the language is different. Modify student. Okay? Let's say you have another foundation called add teacher,
Mm-hmm.
right? Retrieve all teachers and modify teacher. Okay? Your processing service offers a higher order business logic. It orchestrates on the low level, like it orchestrates on one foundation service that have multiple methods, which basically means that if you want to go and say upsert student, it will go and say, student maybe student, and then it will go and call this dot student service dot retrieve all students and then first or default or something like that. Okay? And then out of that, it will go and say, well, return maybe student, return maybe student, switch. So you're basically doing a matching and you're basically going and saying, if that student exists, then modify student. Otherwise, then go ahead and add student. That's an orchestration that leverages the existing primitive operations at the foundation level, but it never leaves the one foundation service. You can't
Right.
have more than one foundation service at the processing level. What that basically means, let's go back here. If I go here and say, we go here and check the processing aspect, we talk about this just in a second. We basically go and say processing services are a layer with a higher order business logic implemented. They make it combine or orchestrate two primitive level functions from their corresponding foundation service.
Yes, I read that wrong. Well, the two primitive level, I scan read that instead of functions. I thought services.
That's fine. You know, you will see I've gone through multiple kind of iterations, and at a really more complex enterprise systems. Here's examples like ensure student exists as retrieval plus add, or upsert students or retrieval, add student async, and modify student async. Verify student exists, retrieve all students. Try remove student async. We gone through all of these in some systems in the past. You
Mhm.
will see that processing services, they still speak somewhat technical language, but it's a combination of multiple primitive operations. If you look at, and I should probably put this in the standard kind of as a drawing, because this is how I explain it to people. It's all orchestration really underneath. But if you have a bunch of foundation services,
Hey,
right?
Kalu.
Hello's there. So if you have like a student service, this student service underneath is nothing but a combination of individual primitive operations, right? What the processing service, like this is an add, this is a retrieve, and this
Processing
is,
services just combine them. Yep.
yeah, the processing service will go here and say student processing serve. Like, look at the, again, like I said to you, it's a fractal pattern. So in here, if you go and say upsert, what this guy is really gonna do, it's at a lower level, it's actually doing an orchestration like this, like this, like this.
Yeah.
But if you go back a little bit at a higher level, again, it's fractal, right? If you have two like these, two of these in here, and let's say this is your teacher service and this is your teacher processing service, you're gonna find that the orchestration service, let's say student orchestration service, based on the most dominant or the purpose of, still orchestration services are single purposed. They orchestrate at a higher level, at the entire service level or across entities. So this guy orchestrates across the one entity for multiple primitive operations. This guy orchestrates across different entities for any primitive operations, and it keeps evolving like that, keeps growing and growing like that. Like for instance, at the architecture level, if this is an entire microservice, like let's say this is your entire microservice in here, look how fractal this is. You could have other microservices like this, and then you end up having like an orchestration like a gatekeeper or something that orchestrates across multiple microservices. See how the anatomy of this works?
Hmm.
It's really just like that. And then watch this. This is your
So,
entire
so just sorry, a question in the back of my head that
mm,
if you make an orchestration service can consume up to three
mhm,
processing services. That's right,
mhm,
and two to three, and it
mhm,
should be. Um, so if you break that and you have to split that off into two, and all of a sudden you've got two orchestration services. How do you
mhm.
orchestrate? Can you then create another orchestration service to orchestrate those two?
Yeah, as long as you're not breaking 2-3.
Yep.
I've seen in bigger companies, like you see this entire architecture in here, I've seen in bigger companies you'll find an entire engineering organization teams that will go like this, Brian. Like this is an organization, and then you have another organization. See how it's going fractally. It keeps going on and on and on. Upwards and downwards, by the way, not
Yep.
just up. So you see how we went from two up.
Yeah, I know that was a fairly fundamental question I asked, but the reason why I asked it is I knew that there was going to be some sort of orchestration service. I just wanted to know if it was okay to call it another orchestration service or,
Mhm.
yep,
I mostly take advantage of things like these to kind of
yeah,
go in depth and talk about, how it
yeah,
really.
yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's basically the deal, right? And you'll see this happening all the time. Like for instance, if you look at, let me show you a crazy example, right? What's a famous airline that you have in Australia?
Oh, it was Qantas. I don't know how famous they are anymore.
Is it Qantas? Is that
Quant,
what you call
Qantas,
Qantas?
yeah, yeah, short for
Qantas.
Queensland. Yeah, Queensland and Northern Territory Air Service, I think it was called. Hmm.
Okay, so check this out. If you look at how the world operates, at least according to a simple person like myself, this is the airline.
What do you know? You even got that's theirs.
Oh yeah, that's the beauty about Draw IO. I can bring anything into anything, right? So these folks, they're sitting like this, right? Imagine this. Let's say internally they are using Microsoft product, right? Like they're using, I don't know, they're using, Office, or they're using a a say a SharePoint or whatever, right? So your end user, the people that are on that airplane, they don't know anything about that because that's all internal, right? But you will also find that they're using something like SAP, right? SAP for enterprise and stuff like that. So they're basically going and saying, give me an orchestration of multiple products, and nobody really knows what's going on underneath that. Like, what are they working on underneath? Nobody knows. But at the company level, you're talking multi hundred thousands of employees. So the person, the customer that's coming in to kind of go on an airplane, they have no idea what Qantas is using underneath.
Mm.
The whole world works like that. And it keeps going on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Think about galaxies and stars, and it just keeps going like that forever. The only thing, and people ask me this question a lot, Brian, they said to me, why 2-3? Why in the heck can I not just do more than 2-3? And my answer is super silly, but it's true. I even told people, I said, look at your blood vessels, look at the thunder. Have you seen the thunder? The thunder, if you look at the thunder, look at the branching on the thunder. Can you find a branch of over 2 or 3? It's almost impossible. Why is that? Look at this. Look, it goes in 2s and 3s all the time.
I showed you that video a long time ago about bifurcation and Mandelbrot sets.
Yep.
Mm.
The same thing happened with tree branches. If you look at tree branches, it will follow the exact same pattern. They'll give you 2-3, 2-3, 2-3, no matter what. No matter what happens. Look, 3, 3, 3, and maybe it's just all in my head, but it's really how it is, how I see it. Especially if you look into an actual real tree.
You see a
What
lot of
about,
Fibonacci patterns in nature as well.
yeah, what about blood vessels? I think that's what they call it. Yeah, blood vessels. Same thing. So this pattern is almost universal. It's consistent in ways that you can't even imagine,
I got
right?
another I got another sideways question for you about this whole thing.
Go ahead.
Is a reflection broker a utility broker?
It's a utility broker in a domain system, and an entity broker in a utility system.
Yeah, I knew you'd give me that sort of answer. Doesn't make me job any easier. I know what you just did there.
Like let me ask you a question. If Christo wants to build a a library for logging, did you know that?
Mm,
Word on the street, he's out there kind of plotting building a standard compliant library for logging because he wants to take the exceptions that we throw and really break it down in the telemetry.
mhm.
So he wants to dig into the problem details. And this is something that we seriously need to work on. That's why I love Christo. He's awesome. He will go in the back and be like, "Hey," and he's using it at work. So that's what's happening there, right?
He's doing some
The
really good work there with what I've seen. I
just like you do.
yeah.
I'm really blessed with people that are really deep thinkers in the community. But if Christo comes today and tells me, "Hey, Hassan, the in the logging broker, which is a logging library, is console write line a utility?" I will be like, "No.
Yeah, I
In
know.
that particular context, it becomes a domain."
Yes. Welcome to my world.
Okay. So here's what we want to do. I want us to kind of go through the restful sense approach. You will be guiding this discussion, but we really need to kind of agree on an architecture,
Yes.
right?
So
What
I've got to go back now and rethink these processing servers, but I don't think that's anything serious. I just need to split them up a bit more and to
if you
put more orchestration on top of them.
so okay, so just help me out here, Brian, with this. You built technically you have technically 4 brokers. It's all reflection, but I know they're kind of
Hmm.
different entities, right? So what you have here is that you have a property broker,
Yep.
you have value broker.
Now, what I realised yesterday when I started to rewrite all this, the first one is actually a type broker. You can't get your properties until you get your type.
Good. And then you have property.
Yes, that's right.
Keep me honest with the order. And
Yeah.
then you have value broker.
Yep. Um,
Mm,
Yeah, okay.
Reflection
For
broker?
for efficiency reasons in this scenario, it's best to use the attribute broker before you use the value broker. There's no point pulling a value unless you have an attribute.
Okay. I mean, we're talking maximum what? Like, okay, Lou,
Yeah,
how many properties was that model that you and I were talking about yesterday?
we're talking nanoseconds here, dude. Like this.
No, 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 no. I've seen a
No,
model that has like 179 properties. So how was it? What is it, Kay?
60, 50 or something like that. And
50
there's
properties.
listed properties.
Carlo and I yesterday were playing with some business stuff and existing, kind of open kind of a platform. Think MLS kind of thing. And they just dumped everything there. And you look at the model and it's like 50 properties. It's like, gosh. Anyway, point is, value broker, I know it's not a biggie, but that's okay. So if you put a bunch of foundation service in front of these, I know you have these already. I saw this,
Hmm.
and so you basically you have uh, type service, you have property service, you have attribute service, and then you have value service, right? That's what we
Yes.
have. So that means you need to have something sitting here and here, and that's the problem that we were at last time,
Mm.
right? Something like this is here. There's multiple kind of categories of breaking, architecturally how things look. But we need to find, this is the question that we left last time, and we really need to solve for this.
So can I go back to my solution that I did a little bit things a little bit different?
Mm.
I went with at my foundation service.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah,
We can see your screen, Brian, by the way.
yeah, just trying to see. I start working with these things called models, where I have an attribute model and I have an object model, and this is where I use the same common contract, and we start building in the. Can you see what I'm doing here? So the after the first pass, we
I see.
when we first, it's like the OpenAI request. Yep. So we have the object, then we get the type, then we get the properties. Yep.
Can you go back one?
Where,
Just control minus. Yeah, that
yep.
works too. Retrieve object types. You're passing in an object.
And all we're doing is,
You get the type, you update the type, and you push it back. I'm okay with that.
yep.
I'm okay with that idea. Also, if you really just want the type, I'm sorry, go inside that model again, please, Brian.
I need the type later on to go and get the properties, so I'm actually sort of building up a little bucket. I'm using Paul's terms now.
I got you.
Mm. So the first time, this is valid, then this one gets validated, and then this gets validated after each step.
I know, but is this object property models will ever be used in the context of this foundation service? I'm talking about the third property.
This one.
Hmm. Is there any scenario where this property is useful for this type service?
No, not in this type service. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Then this type service could have its own model, its own contract. And
Yep.
then as you propagate at the orchestration level,
Introduce it
you
into
can create
another.
another one.
Yep.
By the way, building libraries is much trickier than building domain systems. It'll have you scratch your head. I mean, look, we're in OpenAI. You see the library, it's insane. It's
Mm.
not, it doesn't quite fit the move data around. This is why I'm telling people moving data around, that's great. Building SDKs, come to Papa, right? Come to
Mm.
the real engineering stuff, right? But
So you're
okay,
saying this should end up being two models in the end somehow. So we'll have one that's like this,
yeah,
and another one that's like,
object model is, yeah, something
yeah,
like that. Or you can flatten it. Like you can literally take that object model and flatten it out if it makes
yeah,
sense. It's up to you.
yep.
Can you see how even the models themselves are doing orchestrations? They represent the organization structure of the services that are supporting them. It's beautiful.
So even the object property model itself, that was the array I was building up. That was again the same sort of thing.
Right.
We'll have the property info. This is just a link for, this is me in my database brain linking it back to the original object,
Right.
and yeah, and eventually we'll want the value if we pull a attribute.
Precisely. Let's go back to the architecture. What I'm seeing here, just my own personal perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing here that these are similar because every type has properties. And I'm seeing here at this level, when you get the property from the type, you can go and examine the attributes and the values on these properties. So we can literally call this property orchestration service. And this would be property value orchestration service. And you're basically building a coordination service in here that actually brings all that data back to you. Because really what we're doing is that we're going over every property, extracting the attributes, extracting the value, combining and creating that final model that you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can literally go up here and say multi-part form orchestrate coordination service. So what's going to happen is that when the model comes in, we're going to immediately go get the type. Okay, you got the type. Get the properties on that type. Okay, we got the properties on that type. Go up here, go send these properties in to extract the attributes from it, and then go get the values for these, and then flatten it out, give it to this guy, let it combine it all together. And
So
you
fundamentally, what I've got is right. I just need to rename the processing services to coordinate orchestration.
Yes, and we're gonna just examine the, and I like that you kind of put it in its own side project until it's fully solid, and we can kind of merge it in if we want to.
Yeah, I was thinking we either go that way or we either make it its own product.
Hmm. So this makes sense, right? So this is just as far as I can imagine this. This is gonna be a lighter green, and then this is gonna be darker green, and this is gonna be a really dark green. I don't know if it'll give me the option to do that, but I know, fine. So something like that.
Mm-hmm.
This needs to be darker green though. Hold on. This here's welcome to my crazy, right? So solid, I know, auto. No, I really need darker green. There you go. Yeah, that's more like it. Because the greener it gets, the more focused the business logic is. That's more like it.
What I also liked about this solution I came up with last night is I did not have to bend this to OpenAI until I got to the client.
Yeah. I know you've been telling me this from the beginning.
Mhm.
Just for the people watching, both actually. So Brian was telling me, look, dude, I'm not gonna ruin a very beautiful RESTful API library just because of your OpenAI project. It doesn't make sense. Your library is generic. OpenAI also generic, but within a certain domain. I'm not gonna build specific things for OpenAI. I agree. I love that you said that, right? Because sometimes I may lose sight or lose focus of what is more important because I'm laser focused on getting a certain thing out the door, right? So I will burn the whole town in the process of trying to get that out the door, right? But you still need an opinion of someone else to go and say, wait a second, are you gonna need that anywhere else?
Mm.
Is this something that you care about? Or is this something that you're just kind of, just talking about, you know,
Yeah, I didn't want to backdoor RESTful Sense just for OpenAI, and that's yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
So, and that's totally fine. I totally understand this perspective and I appreciate it. I appreciate that perspective. So anyway, this is the plan. Two things, just reviewing this. It's okay if you want to have a special model for every foundation service here, and then have these models combined. You have virtual models. I mean, it's all virtual models. You really don't add anything. There's nothing physical here, other than the actual properties and the types that you're pulling, Nothing else is physical here.
No.
And then at these orchestration services, you're basically combining the models. So you're creating new models up there. And then all the way up here, this guy flattens all of these out and start actually building that multi-part form.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I'm thinking about, yeah, so multi-part form is technically a primitive.
It's in the HTTP library.
Do we need to have a broker that kind of hides away the functionality of the multi-part form?
Isn't what this client almost does?
Right. Like you're calling multipart.add, right? That's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Multipart form.add, right?
Yeah, yeah, and with add you can either add a string content or a stream content.
Does it make sense to go back here and say multi-part form that hides the existing functionality? And this is your form service. So we're just calling it form because we're hiding it behind our own local things. And then does it make sense to basically go and say, here is my form value all the way like this, and then we basically go up here and say, this is still the same, but you're very purely working with completely localized models all the way up. The only problem with that is that you will be passing a local model and you're getting back a native model, which is I'm not sure about. But otherwise, how are you gonna, like, did you have any problems validating in the test that your multi-part form that was created in the service matches the expectation?
That's where I ran out of puff last night. Jeez. I was in the process of doing that.
So you're probably gonna get stuck there. And if
Yeah.
you hide it behind a broker and say the adding of these parts, and then this form service will offer two functionalities, right? You can see where I'm going with this, right? So two primitive operations. One of them will say add stream,
Yep. The
and
other
one
one.
of them will say add string.
Yep.
And whatever is happening behind the scene here, we
Not our
don't care
problem.
about because we're only testing the logic.
Yep.
Come to think of it, really, foundation services or any services of any kind, all that it's really doing is that it's testing that you're calling the right APIs that abstract away the non-owned primitive or external APIs.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Are you calling the right endpoints? It's orchestration from the beginning till the end. It's nothing but orchestrations. It's not a surprise that you'll see in some of the foundation services, we're calling multiple methods, specifically two, multiple methods on the broker. So the foundation services are also doing some orchestrations, but at the primitive level, at the broker level. Like when you go and say retrieve student by ID, you are calling retrieve all, you're calling retrieve select student by ID, and if it returns null, you throw a not found student
Mm-hmm.
exception. We
When
do
you
the
hit
same thing with modify, right? We
an
call
update,
select an update. Yeah.
yeah, and because of the save. Yeah.
I think this might be a better solution, but we're gonna have to experiment with it. So I'll stick to the architecture. I'm intentionally not trying to touch code in this.
Mm-hmm.
It's all yours. It's a great, it's your innovation, really. It's your genuine novel idea. So if you agree, Kailu, do you see anything problematic in this architecture?
No, it follows our standard. It's good.
Brian, anything?
No.
Let's do it this way.
Yep. That way I don't have to worry about even testing the form.
Nope,
well,
you don't. You shouldn't.
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. I should only have to make sure I've got a stream or I've got a string.
Do you know why foundation services are so simple? Like in terms of what they do, they just add some validation and then they call the thing. Because it's such a pain in the rear to mock the mapping of primitive or native types or external types that you have to work. It's already pain as it is. And I'm already thinking about ways of doing that. Like, someone proposed. So let me just tell you a story. Like about a week ago, someone reached out to me. I love how there's like really just random people out there that will pop up with one question and then they disappear into the void again and you never hear from them. So this gentleman, he said, why don't you inherit when you're using a native type like multi-part form or list or something like that? Why don't you inherit that into a local model and have your services only interact and mock that local model, even for external purposes? How crazy is that? I just don't know if it's feasible. Like, let me give you a closer example, just so you
Yeah.
understand. Mm.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see where does he see the advantage?
He's basically saying, let me show you. He's basically saying, hey, you're struggling and dying to death when you are trying to kind of resemble or create. I'll show you. So let me just create a class here because this one has a lot of. So example.
Nothing on the screen.
I know. I'm trying to hide trying to create a file to hide the
Yeah.
tokens in the. Okay. So what he's saying basically, he's saying, hey, okay, so you have this SQL Server problem that you have, right? So here's your foo, and then if you go and you say, I want my SQL exception that comes from uh, data. Let's even take one. It's one of these hard ones that you just can't mock. You just can't. You have to do crazy stuff to make it work. That's just a weakness, an indication of weakness in our implementation. But I'll come back to this in a second. Entity framework. I think it comes with the entity framework. SQL exception. So this is what this gentleman is saying. He's saying, oh, see, I had to open. So yeah, there you go. System data SQL client or something like that, right? So this guy here, you can't just go and say new SQL exception. It's a freaking pain in the rear. It's very hard. So
Same
what
with
he,
you can't do the same with property infos.
right. So what he's saying, hey, dude, why don't you go and do this? MySQL exception. Well, that's a wrong name. Local SQL exception. Because they're saying MySQL, that's already an overloaded word. And inherit from that like this, and then say, okay, what do you want to do here? I don't think you can even inherit from.
It's probably sealed.
Yeah, it's even worse, right? Anyway, his idea is we need to kind of abstract that away behind a local model. And then when you abstract that away behind a local model, that basically means that you don't have to deal with this guy anymore, ever. It is sealed. It's a horrible, horrible implementation of whatever. Okay, so that's basically his idea. Just something to think about, something that to go and say, okay, is this really the way, and when you try to mock this, it's much easier because you're not dealing with this guy anymore. His idea is this. He's like, by the way, this guy has a chemistry background. He doesn't do software.
So
He's just
okay,
saying,
I guess in this situation when it's sealed, he would encapsulate.
how to do that, Brian? What do you mean by that?
He would just bring it in as a internal field and then expose all the properties.
I guess something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah. Which is
right?
yeah.
So that's his idea. I'm still kind of thinking about it, right? I think he's up to something very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And it doesn't break my rule because you know I don't like inheritance,
Mm.
but if it's one level, it's okay.
With this, I don't. Inheritance exposes, brings in a whole heap of other stuff that you maybe don't want to expose.
Exactly.
Mm.
I just want a model that will get turned into something else, and this something else will basically be what the broker is dealing with. His idea is freaking genius, actually. He said to me, instead of you fighting this fight, this all came from the conversation about SPAL and all that. He basically said, my man, you're fighting this war to localize and standardize, but you have an easy solution. And I was like, what's the easy solution? He's like, he said, you said half of your foundation service, excuse me. He said half of your foundation services is red. I said, yes, because they deal with the external models and the mapping. He's like, okay, can you not just inherit? So you have your external or native model. That's in red. That's not your code. And then you go pick up another one that's local model, and it's abstracting that away. He said you're pretty much doing the same thing at the operational level. Why don't you do it at the model level? Pretty smart. I just don't know how feasible it is. The reason why I'm bringing this up to you is because I want you to try it with the property and see if it works. Does it make it easier to mock a property then? Maybe. I don't know. Then we're gonna
Yeah.
need to have strategies. Like if we can do it with the SQL exception, I think we're winners.
I think the property info is the sealed class again.
Oh, property info is a sealed class.
I'm just having a quick look.
Let's take a look.
No, it's an abstract class.
Even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Can I inherit this guy? Yeah, you can. You should be able to, right? Which means that what happens to this guy? Implement abstract class. There you go. Do you know what's the problem with this? Can you tell? It's already violating the standard because it's carrying data and offering routines. If we're talking about, I don't know, Brian, it's just this is what I have in mind, or that's his idea.
Mm-hmm.
Just something to think about. Is that the option? Is that the way out? With abstract class, it's gonna force you. Maybe the way out is to create again. We go and create SFAL, which will take all of these models and turns them into localized models to SFAL, and then on the domain level, we actually inherit from these because they are inheritable. You can actually inherit from them, therefore you can mock them. Solves huge problem in the development life cycle of these systems. Okay, we have a plan, right? I'm
Yep.
gonna I'm gonna paste this architecture in the channel just so you have it. Unless you know it off the top, then why would I? I don't know, it's up to you. But the only thing is that we need to call this a form coordination services and multi-form coordination services because I'm trying to abstract even conceptually what's
Mm-hmm.
happening. But Brian, it's all yours. I'm not gonna do a session tomorrow, so the whole time until Monday.
Hmm.
And if you need my help, reach for help.
Yep.
We
I
are
will.
we are always here.
I shall do. Do you want me to push this prototype?
Sure.
There's no
Put,
no
put
point.
it, yeah, put it out there, put it publicly, and put it in the channel, and continue to iterate on it. The
Yep.
stuff that you're doing is actually the serious stuff, like talking to an API and wrapping around it. Honestly, that's the joke.
Mm.
Doing something with what you're doing right now, that's the stuff. That's the fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I started doing this broker again last night, and when I started doing it again, I just ended up tearing it all down and started again. You know what I'm like? I'm a bit like you, and it's with code.
Yep. If I don't like it and it's not perfect, by the way, I can't tell you how many times people tell me, "Well, the client doesn't care." Well, I do.
Yeah. I got to
I
live
mean,
with it.
just because the client doesn't see it and doesn't know about it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be perfect. You know what they say, integrity is doing the right thing when no one is looking. If the standard is anything, it's just a very public attempt of keeping engineers at the integrity level, even when no one's looking, except in open source, everyone is looking. I think the standard has now around over 700 likes on GitHub, something like that. So it's getting,
No, yeah, I hadn't been in the channel for nearly 12, 18 hours, and you had 50 new members. I was amazed on
that's pretty
Discord.
cool, right?
Yeah,
Just this morning, we had like 70 members active.
yeah.
Usually we stayed within the 30 and then we went 50 and then it went all the way up like that. And also that guy in Uzbekistan, he doesn't shut up for a second. He's going around in circle, just bringing everybody that wants to learn
Who
about
brought him?
software.
Who
Huh?
brought him? Who brought him? Gee.
YouTube. I think YouTube. I think he found me on LinkedIn or YouTube.
Oh, I
And
thought you'd make it being tongue in cheek about Elbic. Elbic's where's Elbic from?
And then this other Icelandic guy, I don't know what happened. Oh, he told me he's doing some master's or PhD degree, so he's very quiet. Have you noticed? Gudmundur is very completely quiet,
Yes,
right?
he works hard but in spurts. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, anything from your side before we wrap?
No, keep trying, Brian.
Thanks, Kaylee. One more time for the dummies, huh? Oh dear.
Brian Parker, thank you so very much. You're solving the big problems. That's what an engineering team is. You have people that will do push, 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 get something out the door. Okay, great. And then there are things that makes you go,
Yeah, well,
it's
they
not
all
quite
work.
right. And then if you get stuck in that zone, good luck. Lou will be like, keep trying, good luck. You're doing great. You're the last winner. All right, my friend. I'll talk to you later. Thank you
See
all
ya.
for watching. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.